Even though the U.S. and NATO regularly conduct training exercises with both Sweden and Finland, the consequences of the invasion almost certainly would not be happening right now, if not for the war. The New York Times reports that just 20% of Finns were in favor of joining the alliance 6 months ago. Now it's nearly 80%. As the Finnish ambassador to the U.S. told reporters on Thursday, trying to avoid provoking Putin, quote, hasn't changed Russia's actions at all. President Biden spoke with the leaders of Sweden and Finland yesterday. The U.S. and the U.K. have new deals to defend those two countries should they be attacked by Russia during what could be a lengthy NATO application process. But there are other nations that are taking different paths forward. Hungary, led by a newly re-elected right-wing populist, is very publicly holding up an EU embargo on Russian oil. While India, a U.S. and Western ally and the world's largest democracy, though one that is quickly being led down a road of religious nationalism, is taking a self-centered approach, using the war to its advantage and literally paying its price. India gets most of its arms and equipment from Russia, and since the war has significantly increased its purchases of now heavily discounted Russian oil. The new policy has been perfectly summed up by India's finance minister, who recently stated, quote, I would put my energy security first. If the fuel is available at a discount, why shouldn't I buy it? India's overall interest is what is kept in mind. Well, it could be that India, a nuclear-armed country, is taking notice of another major geopolitical consequence of the war in Ukraine, the perception that if you have nuclear arms, the rules don't apply to you the same way. Joining me now to help break down and understand our rapidly changing world and all of the geopolitical implications are Bobby Ghosh, editor and columnist for Bloomberg Opinion, former editor-in-chief of the Hindustan Times, and Ravi Agrawal, editor-in-chief of Foreign Policy and an MSNBC contributor. Both of these gentlemen happen to have worked in India, but both are global economics and geopolitics experts, so they're perfect for this wide-ranging conversation. Good morning to you, gentlemen. Good to see you. Bobby, let me start at the north. We're covering the whole world here. Finland and Sweden wanting to join NATO, not a weird consequence of what's been going on. Turkey, a NATO ally, getting in the way of this.
Yeah, Turkey in the 11th hour says that it may have some problems with Finland and Sweden joining NATO, that it might want to veto this process. The timing of Turkey's announcement is quite suspicious. It had weeks and weeks and weeks to express its opposition more openly and more forcefully. It chose to do so after the Finns announced that they were going to make the application, and after the Biden administration okayed a $500 million sale of F-16s to Turkey. So there is a whiff of opportunism there about the Turkey's announcement. There's a sense that Turkey wants to be talked down from this position, that it is taking this position so that the other NATO allies and the Europeans will make some concessions towards Turkey in order to bring Turkey in line with the rest of NATO.
Ravi, I've often said that if Russia loses all of its friends, as long as it's got China, it probably can sell enough oil and keep going. What do you make of China being a little dissatisfied with Russia's performance and finding it to be an inconvenient friend? Is there any consequence to that?
Russia's only friend in this entire thing. Can you hear me there?
I got you now, yeah.
China. Got it. Okay. So I was just saying that China obviously doesn't want to be seen as purely isolated, as Russia's only friend in this entire thing. It has been concerned, as you had said earlier, Ben Wallace, Britain's defense minister, had pointed out that China is surprised that Russia's performed as poorly as it has. And of course, China doesn't want to be associated with loss in that sense. It doesn't want to become a pariah. And it's been observing this whole war very closely, of course, in terms of how it might apply to itself, were it to want to try and invade Taiwan in the future. Not only that, I think the fact that how this impacts Chinese relations with other countries, how other countries sit on the fence in part because they want to balance their relations with China is also very important. So China's been watching this closely. It is concerned. It doesn't want a world in which, so the world that Putin ostensibly wants is a world of chaos, What China wants is a world actually that lives within the confines of a rules-based international order, except, unlike America right now, it is in control. That's what it wants.
China wants to be the rule maker. They don't want a ruleless world order. That's interesting. Bobby, let's talk about India. Whatever China does, the U.S. has limited ability to apply pressure, as we've seen through the Trump administration. India is a little bit different. India is a U.S. ally, a strong U.S. ally. It's a democracy. It's the world's biggest democracy. It's also very energy hungry and going down some populist roads itself. It finds itself on a fence here.
Yeah, most of the things you said about India are true, Ali, but they were also true during the Cold War. India was a democracy, then was the world's largest democracy, and yet India managed to stay what India would regard as neutral, but what Western countries would regard as a slight tilt to the Soviet Union. And I think what we're seeing is India trying to return to that position, and not just India, a lot of countries that were members of what is called the non-aligned movement, talk about ghosts of Cold Wars past, are trying essentially to stick to return to those positions. But India is trying, in a sense, to have its cake and eat it too. It wants to be completely neutral, but it also wants to be part of the American embrace. It wants access to American technology, to American markets. It wants America's assistance in securing itself from the threat of China. So far, it has paid absolutely no price for taking this position. It is getting cheap gas and cheap oil from the Russians, and the Americans are sort of shaking their heads with disfavor, but they're not punishing India. So from India's position, why not? Why not go with this position? There are moral questions. India used to think of itself as representing some sort of a moral position in the world. We remember Nehru, we remember Gandhi. That India no longer exists, certainly not under Narendra Modi. This is a much more transaction-oriented, much more transactional attitude towards the world and towards the crises around the world.
Of these groups of countries that we're talking about, whether it be Turkey standing in the way of Finland and Sweden, China with an eye on Taiwan and a world order, or India, which actually could move the needle if it decided to not purchase Russian energy and arms, Ravi, what can the U.S. do? What pressure can they apply? It seems like of the big countries that are involved, and there are many other countries that are in similar positions, of the big ones involved, India is America's best chance to exercise some influence.
Perhaps. I mean, for starters, one of the reasons why India has hedged its bets between America and Russia in this particular conflict is, as Bobby said, arms. It buys about 2/3 of its arms from Russia. It wants to ensure that it has access to that as well as spare parts in the future. America could subsidize those arms, or it could make it easier for India to acquire arms. That would be one way forward. There are other ways in which America could try and help India transition to cleaner energy much more faster than it currently is, again, with subsidies. Money talks, money helps. If you look at a lot of what India has been saying over the last few months, what it is doing is basically acting in its self-interest, which is to say there's cheap oil on the market, we can get it, why can't we buy it? That's what we're going to do. And in a sense, this is not just India. It is much of the global south. These are all countries that say, well, why should we hew with America's path just because America says so? We have to look out for our own interests. We also don't necessarily want America to criticize us for our human rights record. And then we have doubts about America's commitment. If it says something, is it actually going to do it? If Biden isn't around in 3 years and there's someone else in power, what happens then? These are all concerns that the global south has. And in a sense, they're valid ones. I'll just say one more thing there. In a post-pandemic world, it's become so clear to countries in Africa and Asia that, when they needed help, when they needed vaccines, they still feel that, they didn't get enough help from the West. So when it comes to this moment, they see themselves as the rest, and with some reason.
This feels like a discussion we need to continue. We'll continue to have it because it's important. I appreciate it, guys. Bobby Ghosh is the editor and columnist for Bloomberg Opinion. Ravi Agrawal is the editor-in-chief of Foreign Policy. Still ahead, we've got a workforce and an economy